Hello, everybody, and welcome to Sake Revolution. This is America's first sake podcast. I'm your host, John Puma from the Sake Notes, also administrator over at the Internet Sake Discord, and I also am in charge of Reddit's r/sake community.
And I'm your host, Timothy Sullivan. I'm a sake samurai, sake educator, as well as the founder of the Urban Sake website. And every week, John and I will be here tasting and chatting about all things sake and doing our best to make it fun and easy to understand.
Welcome again, Tim. We're back, and we're doing the next in our series of episodes recorded at the American Craft Sake Festival in Charlottesville, Virginia. This is the third in our series, and on this episode, we've got one familiar voice as one of our guests on this one. Blake Richardson from Moto-i joined us once again. He also brought his lead brewer, Nick Lowry, along, and we had a nice little conversation about brew pubs in Minneapolis and things of that nature. It was nice to have them over and be able to really kind of focus on what it's like brewing sake over there. And again, I think as we said, when we've done these episodes before, it was such a fun time being over there, having our little booth set up, having brewers come over and chat with us a little bit about what makes their sake special. Do you have any fond memories of that?
Well, I do think that the American Craft Sake Festival for our show is the gift that keeps on giving, right? We've gotten so many shows out of attending this one event, and it was so much fun, as you said. I think that I will remember the heat the most, but looking past that, I think it was just so much fun to have people just wander by our booth and say, oh, you're a Sake Revolution, or have some of the brewers pass by and say, oh, stop by our booth and try our XYZ sake. And just the minute-by-minute interactions we had with the people there, it's just something you can't do on Zoom. Mm-hmm. You can't do one-on-one. It was the group energy that I think was the best.
I agree. For me, I never had the opportunity to taste a lot of the sake that we had that weekend. And so that's a lot of fun as well, because I'm excited about the state of North American sake, but I don't travel domestically that much, so I don't really get to try the stuff as much as I would want. So having this one place where they all come together was great. It was wonderful.
Yeah, and I think that's the very reason we decided to go to the effort to be there in person, set up our equipment, and record this, because it was such a once-in-a-year chance to get so many brewers in one place, and that's just so special. I'm really grateful to the Sake Brewers Association of North America, who organized the whole thing, and then, of course, to North American Sake Brewery, who hosted the event in their front yard and allow us to set up those tents and arrange the tables and everything. It was just amazing. So special thanks to those guys as well. And as you mentioned, John, the conversation we're going to focus on today is with Moto-i, and you and I have both visited Moto-i in Minneapolis, haven't we?
Yes. I've gone a couple of times. Most recently, I was in the neighborhood for a wedding, and so anytime that we weren't doing wedding stuff, it was like, all right, well, we're going to be over at the sake bar, and so we would sneak over there and try whatever they had going on. It was a lot of fun. It was, it was shocking to me how great the sake was over there the first time I tried it. I was so excited. And one thing that we talk a little bit about on the show is how, for us at least, how different it is to have sake from the tap as opposed to, because you and I, we've been at this for a little bit, and most of the time we have sake, it comes over from Japan, it's in a bottle. Even when you're in Japan, it's still in a bottle. The breweries aren't putting tap lines out, really. It's a very unusual situation.
I agree with that.
Yeah, but I think that people who come from the beer world, that's much more familiar. And so a little bit more easily accessible for them. And I think that that's probably why these sake breweries do that, because it's like very familiar. Oh, you pull the tab, you put the glass underneath, boom, here you go. Draft sake. Yeah.
It's definitely a lot more common here. And we also, in this conversation with Moto-i, we talk about their particular setup and their rules and regulations in their state, and how that kind of limits how they can distribute their sake. Yeah. And that makes the taproom experience all that more special, because it really is super fresh and something that you kind of have to go there to experience.
It is. And I was very excited to be able to taste my favorite sake from Moto-i as part of this episode. So I don't want to spoil anything, so I'll wait until we get into it. But I have fond memories of tasting that at the show. So, without any further ado, here we are with Nick Lowry and Blake Richardson from Moto-i. So we're back, and we've got some people, we've got some guests, Timothy. Who have you went and wrangled and brought over to our table?
Yes, we have some brewers from Moto-i in Minnesota, and we would love for you guys to introduce yourself to our listeners.
My name is Blake Richardson. I'm the owner and the head brewer of the Toji of Moto-i.
My name is Nick Lowry. I'm the lead brewer. I am Blake's understudy, his apprentice.
The apprentice, so there's two of them. Okay, got it.
Now, Blake, you are a well-known personality in the world of sake. How long have you been in sake, and what kind of got you started down this path?
Well, I started Moto-i in 2008. I originally was introduced to sake probably 2003 and was absolutely fascinated with the flavors and did a lot of research upon having my first glass of sake and was very surprised to find out there was only 5 breweries in the United States at the time. And one thing led to another, and I searched out a sake brew pub, thinking there'd be somewhere on the West Coast, and it didn't exist. And I thought, well, someone's got to start the first one, and that's what led me to create Moto-i.
So ignorance is bliss, as they say.
Naivete is a strong characteristic of every entrepreneur.
And Nick, how did you get started in sake?
Yeah, I backed into it. I did not, I was not the tip of the spear by any stretch of the imagination. So my background is in food science, public health. In 2017, I had a job that I hated, sitting most of my time in front of a keyboard, but I was a regular at this fantastic local sake brew pub in my hometown of Minneapolis. And so I
wait a minute. Would it be Moto-i?
I think that was the one.
Oh, good. Oh, good.
Memory's a little foggy.
I know there's a few of them.
I drank a lot of sake between now and then, so I don't remember things as well as I probably could. But so I left that job really without a plan. I decided I would spend a summer working in the restaurant industry while I figured out the next phase of my life. And so I applied at my regular local izakaya. And by the end of the summer, I decided it was such a great environment, such a great team that I wanted to stay on. And by the end of that fall, there was an opportunity to help Blake in the brewery. And 7 years later, here I am still making sake.
That's awesome.
It really is. Good. It is awesome.
Yeah.
So Blake, what would you say for crafting sake? I know your sake is available through your brew pub, right? You don't distribute to other states. Is that correct?
That's correct.
It's a travesty.
So it is a travesty.
A legal travesty.
Personally, it makes me very sad.
Yeah. But if people are interested in tasting your sake, they can travel to Minneapolis and visit your brew pub and taste fresh sake there. That's right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Nice.
So what would you say is your signature style, or what do you go for in your sake?
So throughout my travels to Japan, I spent most of my time in the northern regions when I would go over there. And I'm just heavily influenced by sake north of Tokyo. Lighter, drier, crisper, and not just Niigata style sake, but Akita style. One of my favorite breweries is in Akita Prefecture. And so that is primarily what I focus on. That sort of subdued, softer flavors, light on the palate, tend to be more dry. Although with like Kimoto and Yamaha, we make those, they might be a little sweeter, but with some high acidity. But definitely a more northern style sake is what I'd like to fashion our sake to be.
And so, like, when you were first experiencing sake, was that mostly what you were exposed to, or is that something that kind of came to you later?
Oh, that's a great question. I've never thought about it in those terms. I think exposure had a lot to do with it. Yeah. I think exposure to, like I said, just by happenstance, I had visited more breweries in the north than the south. And it had nothing to do with me. It was just whoever was curating the event I was on, like a Gauntner class or the world or the sake tours and whatnot. We just always spent time in the north. So I just became very affectionate to that region of Japan for their sake.
Well, it's a great region.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love it. Yeah. And Nick, for you, what type of sakes do you enjoy personally when you're out enjoying? I know you probably learned your brewing skills from Blake.
Yes.
But when you discovered sake for yourself, what are your personal likes? And
that's a great question. I think, well, for me, my sort of like aha moment with sake came at Moto-i. And I remember distinctly, it was Junmai Ginjo. And that first time that Ginjo Ka came out of the glass and hit my nose, just that effusive apple, banana, bubblegum flavors. It was just it was like coming from the beer world, it was like a saison times 10, like just that fruity flavor that just took me away, that could be in something fermented. And then from there, it's just been all over the map. So I kind of go through phases where I want to try the most umami laden. I want this to be basically mushroom broth in a glass. And then I'll swing and I'll be like, okay, now I want it to be the most Tanrei Karakuchi I can find. And then next it's, I want this to be zebra striped gum. Like I want this incredible ginjo now, so I like fixate on a style and then burn my taste buds out and then move on to the next style. Yeah.
That's a good way to do it. I think when you explore all of the different things that sake has to offer, you're kind of going to get a lot more, out of it.
Yeah.
And as a brewer, I think that's probably going to help you a lot also. Help you kind of understand like, all right, well, if I want to do X, Y, Z, this is where I need to lean, things like that. Do you guys find that when you explore different flavors in sake, you end up, bringing those ideas back to what you guys make?
Yeah, it first starts with the curiosity of how did they get here? What's their water? What's the milling rate? What's the rice? But then where you really scratch your head is what was the technique that got this brewer to get to this flavor? And that, obviously that's a hard thing to find out, but it does cause a brewer, at least us, to think through the process and how we go down the road of creating sake. And luckily we've been able to talk to a lot of brewers over the years to get those ideas and that feedback.
Yeah.
I think another thing that we do as well is we look internally at our portfolio of sake that we have, and we try and identify where the gaps in that spectrum. Do we have that fruity flavor? Do we have that savory? Do we have that genshu that's big and bold? Do we have the kimoto that we've let rest for a year to round out? And do we have the nama that's sharp green and punching you in the face when it comes out of the glass? So we also try and make sure that, within the 7 tap lines that we have in-house, that something different is represented on each one.
Nice. That was actually going to be my next question, was how many different brews do you guys manage at a given time? So about 7 right now?
Yeah, 7 is the most that we can comfortably serve without dipping into doing bottle service and something along those lines. Typically one of those lines is reserved for a Nagori style sake, and then the rest is kind of free reign.
Nice. I think that a lot of people in America have had very few experiences where they get to go to a place and actually have sake from a tap.
Sure.
Like draft sake isn't really much of a thing in Japan. Very few situations where you can experience something like that. But it's something that I think in the West that we see a lot more. We see our brewers here going that way because I think that, maybe American consumers are a little more accustomed to that from beer and stuff like that. You find that people kind of get excited when they see that kind of thing? They get a little surprised when they see it coming out of a tap?
I don't know. I think people seem pretty well adjusted to it.
Nice.
Maybe it's just that we've been around it so much now ourselves that it just seems normal. Seems old hat.
That's probably the case, yeah.
But also our restaurant is quite large. So
yes, it is.
Yeah, I think max capacity, we can probably have over 300 butts and seats at once.
Yeah.
But, only maybe 30 of those are in line with the tap handles. So, if you're up on the patio enjoying that Minneapolis summer, you might be none the wiser that what's in your globe came from a tap handle.
I think the first time I ever had sake come from a tap was at Moto-i.
Oh, great.
That's probably the case. I'm pretty sure. I was like, wait, where's the bottle? I was like really confused.
Sure.
Because normally people come over and they pour or whatever. And nope, and there it is. I'm like, wait. And I saw the taps behind the bar. I'm like, no.
Yeah.
It was like my tiny little mind. It was a long time ago. My tiny little mind exploded. And that was the thing.
Now, what have been some of the biggest challenges that you've had developing your sake program over the years and serving fresh sake to Americans? Have there been anything that's come along that's been a little bit more difficult or challenging for you guys?
That's been a piece of cake. Not a
No
single
problems
thing.
at all? Okay,
Nothing's
great.
ever
Next
gone
question.
well. Nope. No.
The big one was the rice in the beginning.
Oh,
So
let's hear about that.
So when we started, you could really only get Calrose 60 or maybe Calrose 50, maybe Calrose 70.
So when you're saying those numbers, that refers to the rice milling rate, correct? Yeah. And Calrose, we featured on the podcast before. That's an eating rice that has become like a default American sake rice. Is that fair to say?
I think so. Yeah. And so when Moto-i started, I really wanted to introduce the other higher end table eating rices of Japan that were grown in California, like Akita Komachi, Koshiakari, and there's several others, Sasanishiki.
Yeah.
And I also wanted them to be milled to different rates. So, it was all about the variety. I mean, if there's any truth to a brew pub, it should be about the variety of offerings because it's so easy to get it to market. You just have to get it in front of your customer. There's no labeling with the TTB, so on and so forth. So, but there was a moment in time where we couldn't get milled rice, and that presented a huge challenge.
Yeah.
And then one thing led to another, and a mill came up for sale, and we decided to go get that mill and started another company, which we only had one customer at the time, which was Moto-i. So it seemed kind of silly to have this giant mill and one customer. But anyway, that's probably a longer story. But that was a huge challenge at the time. And then education was always a challenge.
Yeah.
It was a lot of research. Translate this phrase into Japanese, go to Google Japan, research it, find out that you're way off target, and a bunch of cartoons come up in the image. And okay, let's try again. And I did that for hours and hours, and eventually would land on a science paper and get some information. But now it's turned completely. Now information is more readily available. There are books you can buy, people you can talk to. So those are two challenges in the beginning, but there's still challenges that are
for sure.
Yeah.
So you're finding that though, like education wise, as far as like the knowledge to make sake here in North America, that coming across that information is becoming easier.
Yeah, definitely.
100%.
Yeah.
And I guess of higher quality too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure. Yeah. There's still a lot of questionable decisions being shared out on the internet. I mean, you can find.
Well, it is the internet.
Yeah. You can
They
find
excel at that.
Yeah.
plenty of forums where people are trying some wacky stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, especially now that there's more of a homebrewer presence, that's where I think the West really shines in the ingenuity and the willingness to experiment, that grassroots sort of collective, and that information sharing is so prevalent in that community.
Yeah.
So there's really a groundswell now of people sharing their knowledge and improving their products.
That's awesome.
And today we're at the American Craft Sake Festival in Charlottesville. What's your impression of this event, and what have you been experiencing so far here today?
So far, it's been great. We've had a chance to meet a lot of people that we have never served sake to, a lot of old friends, yourselves included, that we've met over the years. Because we can't distribute our sake, coming to events like this are really important to us to be part of this community, not only to get exposure for ourselves, but also to maintain those relationships with sake drinkers and other sake makers. So we tend to think of these less as like marketing events and more of like goodwill tours where we're sort of out here and keeping that network strong. Yeah.
And I bet it gives you a chance to get reactions to your sake from people from other parts of the country, other backgrounds.
Yeah.
And that must be really exciting for you guys.
Indeed. It's great to share the love of the product with the people and then get feedback in real time. I mean, it's just having that moment with a customer is so valuable. It's irreplaceable. We serve sake. We're serving sake right now at Moto-i, but we don't know what's happening. We don't know who's enjoying it. What the feedback is. But this is such an opportune time.
Yeah.
It can also be intimidating though, because we're not bartenders. We're brewers. We're used to being in coolers and koji rooms, not sweating in front of people out in the Charlottesville heat.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're normally sweating in the koji room, right?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. And for people listening on at home, it is hot out here today. Right now we got a nice little breeze, but it's not going to last.
Yeah.
We've had it come a couple of times, but oof.
Yeah,
That's rough.
It's that Virginia heat.
That Virginia heat. But you know what cuts into that Virginia heat, Timothy?
What's that?
Sake.
Yes.
That's something to cool us off a little bit.
So since we have some brewers at the table with us, how about we taste some of their sake together?
I think that's an excellent idea.
Okay, so Blake and Nick, you were generous enough to bring a bottle for us to taste today. Can you give us the stats or some intro to the sake you're going to be tasting with us?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is one of our oldest branded sakes, arguably our first branded sake. It's called another Dalliance. It's made with Yamada Nishiki, 57% milling rate. We use a yeast strain from Akita Prefecture. Affectionately call it AK21 because it's from Akita Kono. And so it's a nice, I think, example of what I was describing earlier as a lighter northern style sake, to be sort of very general about it.
Awesome.
Nice.
All right. Well, let's get this sake in the glass and taste it together.
Yeah.
All right. So there is nothing better than being poured a sake from the Toji himself.
Yes, that's a nice thing.
It's a very nice thing.
Yes.
Right. So we've got another Dalliance. And is this a Junmai Ginjo?
Junmai Ginjo.
Junmai Ginjo grade sake.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's look at the aroma first.
Good.
And this is a Nama, is it not?
Namazume.
Namazume. Okay.
Namazume. All right.
What do you think, Timothy?
So on the aroma, this you mentioned, Blake, about that cleaner, lighter style. This almost reminds me of a Niigata style sake, which is right up my alley. That's a style of sake that I love. There's just a hint of steamed rice, a little bit of a rice note, and it's also very overall clean on the aroma. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Agreed.
Yeah, a clean touch of fruit, not all, just
a
not
hint of
bowling you over.
fruitiness.
It's restrained.
Yeah.
Yes.
I love my restrained elegance.
You do.
That's my zone.
Right on.
Let's have a sip.
Really clean,
Yeah.
crisp.
Clean, crisp, and that fruit is there. And it's not overwhelming you. This is definitely not the fruit bomb that we occasionally talk about. But nice and crisp, and I think that crispness is in the mouthfeel as well. It has that. It tastes a little bit more raw in a way.
Yeah. For me, there's a lovely hint of apple and really clean finish. Blake, how do you describe this sake to your visitors that come to your brew pub?
Well, like today, we have this contrasted with another sake made with omachi, and this is much lighter, much softer, delicate. You want to enjoy this with some lighter fare. Nothing too oily or nothing that will suppress the flavor from hitting the palate. Yeah.
That's wonderful. And I think if people could join us here today at this American Craft Sake Festival, I think people who had American-made sake 15 years ago, 20 years ago, would probably be bowled over with all the improvements in quality. Can you guys speak to that at all? What do you think has brought about this great improvement in quality across the board?
Well, from my perspective, I mean, I'm literally standing on the shoulder of giants. Like any of my success comes from Blake and the people before me that have paved the way. So I think, going back to that community aspect, I think that's growing so strong that we're always entertaining visitors from future breweries, from established breweries, and using those opportunities to share that knowledge. And I think it's becoming more difficult now to simply open a brewery based on the novelty aspect of sake. I think the consumer is more educated and has higher expectations. I think you can't quite pull off that beer brew pub with the folding card table and bag snacks anymore. You have to hit the ground running.
Right.
And there's a lot of new breweries here at this event that, have been opened within the last 2 years, and they're doing just that. I think the consumer demands it, and I think the expectations are just higher now than they used to be.
We've also been lucky to have more rice varieties. That's a huge piece of the puzzle. Milling rates, obviously, we talked about that already. And then just the knowledge of, quite honestly, I didn't even know how to find another koji manufacturer in Japan, because it wasn't something I talked to someone down the street or across the country. It was where can you find carbon if you wanted a carbon filter a sake? That's a mystery that in 2009, 2010 that I was never going to crack easily. But now just everything's readily available. There's someone who knows, they know somebody who does know. This times have changed so much with regard to access to knowledge.
Yeah.
And the brewers in Japan, I think, are so generous with their knowledge.
Yeah, absolutely.
As opposed to, who are you again? Where do you come from? They just were, it's confusing to think in different those terms at those times, but yeah.
And I think to that point, I think the education sharing internationally has grown by leaps and bounds, and not just in a willingness, but also an actual outsized effort of sharing that knowledge and bringing that knowledge to the West. Even just here today, the ITA group is represented, Kyoto Electronic Manufacturing, an equipment maker, is here as well. There's so much more outreach and investment from Japan in this environment.
That's great.
Yeah. I think that the point you mentioned about community growing is really key. And I've seen that as well on the education side as well as the brewing side.
Yeah.
And I think the hosts of today's event here, the Sake Brewers Association of North America, are playing a really strong role in giving people a place to go to find how to get koji, or if they want to learn something or they want to connect with other brewers. So I think community is really one of the key things that is helping the quality of sake to grow over time, for sure.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I do think it's a testament to you guys that, like, it's like Moto-i was one of the first and still going and still keeping up and in a lot of ways innovating and making great sake that people love. People really enjoy going over to your brew pub and chasing your sake.
Thank you.
It's a great thing.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
Now, if people want to visit you in Minneapolis, can you tell us where they should go and where can they find you online if they want to learn more?
You can find us at moto-i.com, moto-i.com. And then all of our social media is Moto-i Sake, MOTOI-SAKE. And we are located at 2940 Lindell Avenue South, Minneapolis, 55408.
Well, I hope that will be a destination for all the Sake Revolution loving listeners who hopefully will visit you in person and taste your sake fresh from the tap.
Absolutely.
It is certainly an experience, and I would love for people to go over there and have have the same experience that I had when I visited, kind of by accident many years ago. But I really opened my eyes to what was possible from North American brewers, and it's been a touchstone for me ever since.
Thank you.
That's very kind of you.
You
to
guys
say.
make great sake, and it was an absolute pleasure to have both of you on the
It's our
podcast
honor.
today.
Thank you.
No, thank you so
likewise.
much.
Yeah, you guys are doing great things in helping build that
Absolutely.
community.
Appreciate
It's-
it.
So true.
Yeah,
All right.
it's a pleasure to listen to your podcast and to hear you guys speak to others about their experience and their sake. And yeah, it's wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
guys
you.
so
Thank
much.
you so much, guys. This is great.
Yeah.
Thanks for
That's
the
awesome.
time.
Another Dalliance, Tim. I like that sake.
That was so nice. That's so good.
Yeah. That was a good time. That was fun. I really enjoyed hearing their stories. I really enjoyed how both Nick and Blake got into sake. I think that Nick's story especially is a lot of fun. The idea that he was he was a customer and he fell in love with sake. He had never had sake before. I think that's awesome. I think that says a lot about how North American sake is going to grow. You don't need to have people like us who have been drinking sake for years to get into it. You can just have somebody that strolled into a North American brewery and got blown away and wanted to make sake.
Yeah, that is really special. And I think it's going to take a lot more stories like that to build out the industry. And it's just so heartening to hear how it's happening there in their brewery and how they're growing their team. And it was such a fun conversation. Really loved it.
Absolutely.
Well, before we close, I just want to say one more time a special thank you to our guests, Nick Lowry and Blake Richardson of Moto-i in Minneapolis. We had so much fun talking to them and thank them so much for taking the time to come on Sake Revolution. We want to thank you, our listener, as well. Thanks so much for tuning in again today. We hope you're enjoying this series from the American Craft Sake Festival. And as a final thanks, one more time, we just want to say a special thank you to the Sake Brewers Association of North America for organizing the Craft Sake Festival each year, and to North American Sake Brewery for hosting us in their front yard. It was a lot of work to put this together, and we appreciate them so much. If you're enjoying these podcasts, there's a great way to support Sake Revolution. Go on over to patreon.com/Sake Revolution, and there you can sign up to become a patron. Special hello and thank you to all of our existing patrons. Thank you all so much for supporting the show.
And don't forget to make your way over to Moto-i if you do find yourself in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Also, very important, tell your friends about our show. Get out there When you go to Minneapolis, tell your friends about Sake Revolution.
Tell anyone you're sitting next to.
Yeah,
about
tell the person
Sake
in the bar next to you. I'm sure they'll be happy to hear about it. And while you're at it, go ahead and leave us a review on your podcast platform of choice, your iTunes or is it still iTunes? No, your Apple Podcasts, your Spotify's, all that other fun stuff. It lets the algorithm know that we exist, and it will suggest us to other people who are interested in sake. Who knew? So, without any further ado, please grab a glass. Remember to keep drinking sake and kanpai.